Georgine was once full of potential, poised to become a renowned movie star in the future. However, fate had something entirely different in store for her. One fateful day, just steps away from reaching her home, she vanished without a trace. In the summer of 2006, 14-year-old Georgine Kruger moved with her family to Berlin. Her parents had divorced a few years prior, and she now lived with her mother and her younger sister. Her older brother, Tommy, was 22 at the time and lived on his own. As the new girl in class, Georgine found it difficult to make friends. The other girls in school were not fond of the attention she received from the boys, who were drawn to her looks, though Georgine wasn't aware of the extent of her popularity. She took great care of her appearance, always wearing the latest trends and enjoying makeup. Georgine dreamed of becoming an actress and even considered modeling as a possible career. She often danced in front of the mirror, trying out different outfits, imagining herself on a grand stage. Her love for movies, especially Indian films, inspired her as she practiced the actors' moves and sang along to their songs while watching TV. On Friday, September 22, 2006, it seemed like her dreams were on the verge of coming true. Georgine had been offered a small role in the film Turkish for Beginners. She was told that she would receive a call on Monday, September 25th, with a final decision. The filming was set to take place during the upcoming fall break, and Georgine eagerly anticipated the news. Over the weekend, the wait felt endless for her, as she looked forward to confirming the role she had long hoped for. Monday, September 25, 2006, finally arrived, and despite being distracted, Georgine managed to get through her school day. She hurried home after class, determined not to miss the call from the agency. After leaving school, she headed straight to the bus stop, boarded bus number 27, and traveled just a few stops before getting off. From there, she had only some feet to walk before reaching her house. Around 2 p.m., she was seen getting off the bus. At home, her grandmother and younger sister had already prepared lunch and were waiting for Georgine to join them, but she never arrived. At 2 p.m., her grandmother tried calling her, but there was no answer. Concerned, she wondered if perhaps Georgine had missed the bus or stopped to talk to someone. Time continued to pass, and when another attempt to call went straight to voicemail, her grandmother's worry grew. Her grandmother decided to contact the school to check if anything unusual had happened. The school confirmed that Georgine had attended all her classes and left for home as usual. Her teacher did mention that Georgine seemed distracted that day, but her grandmother knew why. Georgine had been eagerly awaiting the call from the casting agency all weekend. As more time passed, her grandmother grew increasingly anxious. When Georgine's mother returned home, she was informed of the situation and immediately felt that something was wrong. It was entirely out of character for Georgine not to show up on time or contact her family. She was always punctual and responsible. Her phone, too, was never switched off. She quickly called the police to report her daughter's disappearance. Initially, the police considered several possibilities. Could Georgine have run away? Had she gotten into a disagreement with family or friends? Or maybe done something impulsive in the name of teenage love? However, It was crucial to remember that Georgin had been expecting an important call from the casting agency that day, and she wouldn't have missed it for the world. When Georgin was last seen, she was wearing light blue ripped jeans, ankle-high brown-heeled boots, and a white denim jacket. She also carried a pink backpack with long straps and had her mobile phone with her, which was later found to be switched off. By tracking the phone, detectives determined that the device had been active at 2:06 p.m., but by 2:08 p.m., it was turned off. It seemed unlikely that Georgin, so close to her home, would have suddenly changed her mind and gone elsewhere, especially when she was eagerly waiting for the casting agency's call. She was seen getting off bus number 27, confirming that she had been just minutes away from her house. A large search operation was launched in the neighborhood where the Kruger family lived, but Georgin was never seen again. All nearby attics and basements were thoroughly searched, with police using trained dogs to detect human remains. Investigators questioned local residents and Georgin's classmates and checked into several offenders who were either out on bail or had recently been released from prison. The Kruger family distributed flyers with Georgin's photo, and posters with her description were put up throughout the district. Her mother personally went door to door, seeking any clues about her daughter's whereabouts. Despite these extensive efforts, the investigation stalled with no substantial leads. Georgin seemed to have disappeared into thin air, just some feet away from her home. Weeks turned into months, and 3 years after her broad daylight disappearance, a second search operation was organized. This time, search dogs were used again, trained not only to detect human remains, but also to find living individuals. The dogs started their search from the bus stop, but instead of leading investigators to the Kruger home, they were directed toward the suburbs. Police searched the wooded area but found no trace of the girl's presence. It wasn't surprising, given the difficulty of tracking a scent after 3 years. Unfortunately, the renewed efforts didn't yield any new leads and the case remained stagnant. Years later, in 2016, another search was conducted, this time with a glimmer of hope for results. Residents of the neighborhood where the Kruger family lived were once again interviewed, and there was a small breakthrough. Neighbors recalled a 30-year-old unemployed man who had lived in the area. He spent hours on his porch, watching teenagers pass by, seemingly enjoying the view. He was frequently seen engaging young girls in conversation, often saying inappropriate things and asking provocative questions, like whether they had ever been with boys, hinting that he could help them with such matters. This man, identified as Ali, was known to try to downplay his age and present himself as younger in order to win the attention of teenage girls. Although the girls didn't fear him, they found him odd and kept their distance, which made the neighbors take notice of his behavior. Ali lived in the same apartment complex as the Kruger family. He had 3 children and lived with his wife. Unemployed and struggling with debt, he took on odd jobs and relied on social benefits to make ends meet. Despite his financial struggles, Ali had a fascination with luxury cars and fashion, even though he could only dream of owning them. When he wasn't watching the girls, Ali would spend his free time in a Turkish cafe located in the ground floor of the apartment building, meeting with acquaintances. Though he didn't have close friends, he regularly interacted with locals. The police paid close attention to the testimony about his suspicious behavior and checked his criminal history. In 2011, Ali had been involved in a violent incident where he lured a 17-year-old neighbor into his basement. The girl had been walking home with a friend when Ali, standing on the porch of his house, offered her a new mobile phone. Tempted by the offer, the girl hesitated, but eventually followed him to the basement where he claimed the phone was stored. However, there was no phone waiting for her. Instead, Ali confessed that he had been in love with her for a long time and was willing to leave his wife just to be with her. When the girl rejected his advances, Ali struck her on the back of the neck, causing her to collapse. He then sat on top of her, and despite her efforts to resist and scream, the girl was unable to fight him off. After the assault, Ali handed her a tissue to dry her tears and threatened her to keep quiet, warning her not to tell anyone, not her family, friends, or the police. The girl nodded in agreement, but once she escaped the basement, she headed straight to the police station and reported everything, pointing directly to Ali. She also gave a detailed description of the basement, mentioning specific details that confirmed her story. According to her, the basement looked more like a personal hideout where Ali spent his free time, rather than a cluttered storage space. In 2012, Ali was sentenced to a 1.5 years of probation for assaulting the 17-year-old girl, along with charges of bodily harm. During his trial, Ali claimed that the girl had asked for a mobile phone and followed him voluntarily. He denied any wrongdoing, asserting that he wouldn't jeopardize his family's well-being, and accused the girl of fabricating the story. However, the girl's account matched with the evidence and Ali was found guilty. This case bore eerie similarities to Georgin's disappearance. Both girls had been returning home after school and vanished in the same area where Ali had previously attacked another teenage girl. According to the phone data, Georgin disappeared just down the street from where Ali lived. Georgin would have had to pass by Ali's door in any case. Could Ali have intercepted her somehow? The issue was that the search dog showed no interest in the basement of Ali's house, and detectives lacked specific evidence. No witness statements, no DNA, nothing concrete to tie him to the crime. The only notable detail was that on the day of Georgin's disappearance, both her phone and Ali's were detected in the same area. While this could suggest they were together, it might simply indicate that they lived on the same street. Interrogating Ali seemed futile without substantial proof, as he would likely deny any involvement in Georgin's disappearance. As a result, the authorities decided to use a rather unconventional strategy. They began monitoring Ali's phone calls. Over weeks of surveillance, they discovered that Ali had financial troubles. He was gambling and owed a significant amount. The police decided to exploit this weakness. Instead of engaging in a long-term, costly operation, they chose to infiltrate Ali's circle. An undercover officer was assigned to the case. His mission was to gain Ali's trust and gather any information related to Georgin Kruger's disappearance. Posing as a successful businessman looking to open a car wash in Berlin, the officer introduced himself at the Turkish cafe Ali frequented. The cafe, conveniently located in the same building where Ali lived, became the perfect spot for the officer to establish contact with the suspect. The operation was expected to take time, as any sudden move could arouse Ali's suspicions. The officer gradually became familiar with the cafe regulars, sharing his story about wanting to start a car wash business in the area. He mentioned he was looking for a manager with a good salary, which piqued Ali's interest, especially given his financial struggles. Soon the officer and Ali became inseparable. They even took a business trip to Frankfurt together, deepening their bond. Ali began to believe that his life was about to change, envisioning himself as the manager of the new car wash. Ali tried to present himself as a respectable man, eager not to lose out on the lucrative job opportunity. Ali thought that if everything went according to plan, his financial troubles would be over, and he could finally afford the lifestyle and luxury cars he had always dreamed of. Despite the developing friendship, the case of Georgin made no progress. To move things forward, the authorities introduced another undercover agent, codenamed Susie, into the operation. According to the cover story, Susie was the officer's girlfriend. Her role was to grow close to Allie's wife in hopes of gathering information. Over time, they became close friends, and the two couples often spent time together, hosting parties and even going on vacations. However, even with this deepening connection, the case remained cold, with no evidence linking Allie to Georgin's disappearance. Ali's sister began to grow suspicious of the undercover agents. She felt that they had not entered her brother's life by chance and was skeptical of their motives. She even noticed that they didn't seem like a genuine couple. If Ali had paid attention to his sister's concerns, the situation might have played out differently. However, he was too focused on his potential future as a business manager to listen to anyone. Realizing that Ali was determined to maintain his image in front of his supposed employer, the investigators brought another undercover agent into the operation, the officer's cousin, who had a criminal past. According to the cover story, the cousin was involved in shady activities and was willing to commit crimes. The authorities hoped that by associating with someone willing to break the law, Ali might open up and reveal critical information. With no physical evidence to rely on, they could only hope for a confession. The cousin and Ali quickly bonded, beginning their friendship with a visit to a brothel. Despite initially trying to maintain an image of loyalty to his wife, Ali soon abandoned his principles. The cousin paid for the encounter out of his own pocket, explaining that he had earned the money illegally, which allowed him to spend it freely. This approach revealed two sides of Ali, one as a family man who wanted to work hard for his future, and another as a carefree partier for whom his wife and children were not an obstacle to indulgence. To solidify the operation's credibility, the investigators went as far as renting land for the fictional car wash and signing a fake contract with Ali. All hopes were now pinned on the cousin. If he couldn't extract a confession from Ali, the case of Georgin might remain unsolved. However, in 2018, something unexpected happened. An unknown man called the police, claiming that while he wasn't the perpetrator, he knew where Georgin Kruger's body was. The caller provided coordinates for where the remains could be found before hanging up. Efforts to trace the call were unsuccessful, but a team of specialists was dispatched to the location. The coordinates led to a nearby forest, where an extensive search was conducted, but no trace of the girl was found. It remains unclear whether the call was a cruel joke or an attempt to mislead the investigation further. Unfortunately, the caller was never located, leaving investigators at a dead end once again. Nevertheless, new flyers were created with a special QR code. When scanned, the code allowed people to hear the anonymous caller's voice, in the hope that someone might recognize it and provide a clue. Meanwhile, the detectives tried to set a trap for Ali. They rented his favorite model of Porsche, equipped it with a listening device, and placed a flyer with Georgin's picture and QR code in the back seat. Through the undercover agents, they arranged for Ali and his wife to take a ride in the car, hoping it would spark a conversation about the missing girl. Initially, Ali and his wife didn't notice the flyer, but eventually it caught their attention. Ali became noticeably nervous. He began speculating about who the caller might have been and what information they could have had. Later, Ali took the flyer to the Turkish cafe, showing it to his friends in an attempt to gather more information. He claimed he wanted to help the police. This raised suspicions among the investigators, as they wondered why someone with no connection to the case would suddenly feel the need to collect information after so many years. Ali's actions only reinforced the authorities' belief that they were on the right track. The next phase of the operation was to use the cousin's relationship with Ali to their advantage. The cousin confided in Ali about his troubled relationship with his girlfriend, explaining that he had wanted to break up with her for some time but couldn't because she was blackmailing him. He revealed that he had once killed someone and had confessed this secret to his girlfriend. Now, she was threatening to go to the police if he left her. He sought Allie's advice on how to deal with the situation. Allie sympathized but did not reveal anything about Georgin's disappearance. To accelerate the process, the cousin offered Allie €150,000 to eliminate his girlfriend by any means necessary, even if it meant breaking the law. The detectives knew that Allie was in dire financial straits and had yet to start his job as a car wash manager. The €150,000 could solve all his problems. Ali, eager to seize the opportunity, offered to take care of the blackmailer himself. He began planning various ways to carry out the job, discussing details such as the girl's weight, whether a car would be needed, and the best location for the attack. As Ali considered his options, the trap was closing in. While discussing the logistics of the crime, Ali confessed to the cousin that he had researched online how to dispose of a body. The undercover agent let Ali talk freely, avoiding any accusations of entrapment. During these conversations, Ali eventually opened up about Georgin's disappearance. He described her as an attractive young girl who passed by his door every day on her way home from school. On September 25, 2006, he was waiting at his usual spot when Georgin stepped off the bus. That day, she was in a good mood, smiling and radiant. Ali approached her, asking for help carrying some bags to his basement, offering to pay her for the favor. Knowing her neighbor and not suspecting any danger, Georgin agreed. When Georgin entered, Ali struck her on the head. She screamed in pain, so to silence her, he hit her again, harder this time. Georgin lost consciousness and collapsed. Ali then described what happened next, lamenting his actions but knowing that if he let her go, he would face prison. So he strangled her until she stopped breathing. Ali's detailed account of the assault was too vivid to be fabricated, and his story matched known facts. After killing Georgin, Ali hid her body in the basement for 3 days before wrapping her in an old rug and disposing of her in the trash. Investigators later confirmed that all trash was incinerated, meaning Georgin's remains were completely destroyed. Ali's confession was enough to arrest him, and in December 2018, 12 years after Georgin's disappearance, he was taken into custody while at home with his daughter. All of Ali's properties were searched, but no evidence was found linking him to the missing girl. During questioning, Ali remained silent. He did not speak when charged and continued to say nothing in court. He remained in custody for 1.5 years while he and his family were confident he would be acquitted, as there was no physical evidence against him, no DNA, no body, and no witnesses, just his confession. However, the prosecution compared Ali's previous conviction with his statements and found significant similarities. It appeared to be the work of the same criminal. Ultimately, it was Ali's detailed account of the events on the day Georgin disappeared that convinced the jury and judge of his guilt in the death of 14-year-old Georgin Kruger, a girl who might have achieved fame in the film industry. The news of her neighbor's arrest and subsequent conviction devastated her. On March 17, 2020, Ali was sentenced to life imprisonment. He later claimed he was a victim, stating that he had agreed to act as a hitman for the cousin's girlfriend to protect her and take her out of danger. He intended to go to the police and expose the cousin's plan. Despite his claims of innocence, his confession spoke for itself. Surprisingly, Ali's family also believes he was wrongfully convicted, arguing that the police spent too much time and money trying to incriminate him. They believe the crime was pinned on him to justify the expenses. Only Ali knows the full truth, and perhaps one day his conscience will compel him to fully admit his guilt. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Mary Welch, the 10-month-old daughter of Seth Welch and Tatiana Fusari, was discovered dead on August 2, 2018. Instead of immediately seeking medical assistance upon finding her lifeless body, the couple contacted their legal team first. As the investigation unfolded, the horrifying details of the case came to light, marking it as one of the most disturbing incidents detectives had ever encountered. While they had witnessed children suffering from severe malnutrition before, the sight of Mary moved them to tears. It was the most heart-wrenching and shocking case they had ever worked on. So, what exactly happened to Mary? Kent County, nestled in the heart of Michigan, is home to a lively community of 657,000 residents. Known for its exceptional quality of life, it stands as one of the best places to live in the state. The county embraces diversity, fostering a sense of unity and inclusion that makes it a welcoming haven where families can thrive. With a perfect blend of urban energy and small-town charm, Kent County offers the best of both worlds, allowing residents to enjoy the vibrant city life while savoring the cozy atmosphere of a close-knit community. The friendly nature of the county creates an inviting environment where neighbors become friends, and a strong sense of belonging flourishes. However, within this seemingly idyllic setting, tragedy struck. This was no accident. A life was lost. But what led to such a devastating outcome? Tatiana Fusari, born on June 1, 1990 in New York, moved to Grand Rapids at the age of 20 to reconnect with her estranged mother. Sadly, her mother rejected her, leaving Tatiana to find her own way in an unfamiliar city. Eventually, she enrolled in child development at Grand Rapids Community College, dreaming of one day opening her own daycare. Feeling lost and alone, Tatiana's life took a turn when she met a charming man named Seth Welch, who was a year younger and hailed from Cedar Springs, Kent County. The two immediately connected, and after just one date, they moved into a modest house together. As time passed, the honeymoon phase ended, and Tatiana found herself trapped in a toxic and controlling relationship. Seth's demanding nature and frequent criticisms became the norm. Despite the difficulties, Tatiana discovered she was pregnant with their first child, hoping this would mark a new beginning for their lives. Over time, the couple had 3 children, a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and the youngest, Mary Welch, born on October 23, 2017. In an effort to create stability for their growing family, Tatiana and Seth purchased a farm near Cedar Springs. Yet, just when Tatiana thought life might improve, Seth's behavior became even more troubling. One day, Tatiana walked in on Seth having an inappropriate video call with another woman, leading to a heated confrontation. Seth responded with violence, pushing her and repeatedly hitting her. Isolated from friends and fearful of Seth's increasingly erratic behavior, Tatiana felt trapped. Seth's control extended beyond emotional and physical abuse. He imposed religious beliefs on their household, refusing medical care for his children on religious grounds. He believed in natural selection, thinking only the strong should survive, and refused to vaccinate the kids. His disturbing mindset saw their children not as precious lives to nurture, but as burdens if they couldn't contribute to his ideals. On August 2, 2018, Tatiana went to pick up some clothes from a neighbor's house. Upon returning, she sensed something was terribly wrong. Around 10 a.m., she woke Seth to tell him their youngest daughter, Mary, wasn't breathing. Despite Tatiana's frantic attempts at CPR, it was clear that Mary had been dead for some time. Seth called 911 at 12:16 p.m., reporting the death of their 10-month-old daughter. Officers arrived at the home in Cedar Springs. The scene was devastating. Little Mary was found lifeless in her crib, her body frail and emaciated. But the most horrifying discovery was the state of her crib. Her mattress was soaked with urine and covered in mold. The paramedics couldn't immediately determine whether the child was 10 days or 10 months old due to the severe state of neglect. The circumstances surrounding the infant's death were unclear, prompting investigators to treat the case as suspicious. Although Seth Welch allowed investigators to search the home, they waited for a warrant to conduct a thorough investigation. Once the warrant was obtained, the police led a detailed examination of the Welch residence, where they uncovered disturbing conditions in baby Mary's crib. The home was described as extremely filthy, with toxic black mold found under the mattress. The house was also infested with flies, and mouse droppings were found in the drawers. During the search, only one container of baby food was discovered, and no formula was found at first. However, crime scene photos later revealed 3 containers of baby formula in the house, 2 of which had expired 5 months before Mary's death. Mary had been left alone for at least 19.5 hours before she was discovered. A hole in the door of her bedroom allowed her parents to occasionally check on her, but despite these intermittent checks, her condition had worsened dramatically. What came to light after the investigation was shocking. Seth, Mary's father, responded to the discovery of his daughter's lifeless body in an unnervingly strange way. Instead of immediately seeking medical help, he made a series of bizarre decisions. First, he called his parents, who were lawyers, to seek advice on what to do next. He then searched the internet for information on a rapper's kidnapping, a topic entirely unrelated to the situation. In another bizarre move, he sent a text message about selling a goat, showing a complete lack of urgency about the dire situation. It took nearly 90 minutes before he finally called 911 to report the tragedy. This delayed response caused detectives to question his actions and priorities during such a critical time. Further investigation revealed that Child Protective Services, CPS, had previously interacted with the family in 2014 when THC, or the primary psychoactive compound found in cannabis, was found in their eldest child's system at birth. Seth had expressed distrust of doctors, claiming they had falsified documents against him. A forensic pathologist who performed Mary's autopsy determined that the cause of her death was a combination of severe malnutrition and dehydration, the result of prolonged neglect by her caregivers. Death from starvation or dehydration is a slow and painful process where the body gradually breaks down its muscle and fat reserves. At 10 months old, Mary weighed only 8 pounds, almost the same as she did at birth. Her body had become so weak that she couldn't move her arms or legs, crawl, or even lift her head. He also noted that Mary's condition was not sudden. It resulted from chronic malnutrition that had likely lasted for weeks or even months. She lacked the strength to cry for food or water and simply suffered in silence until her last breath. The couple was summoned to the Kent County Sheriff's Department in Michigan for questioning on the same day. During her interrogation, Tatiana broke down immediately when asked how many children she had, displaying a flood of emotions. While it seemed like genuine grief, detectives wondered if it was an attempt to gain sympathy or if she was afraid for her future, especially since she had waited hours to contact the authorities and had consulted lawyers first. Meanwhile, Seth, in a separate room, showed no emotion and appeared to be in good spirits, acting unaffected by the death of his 10-month-old daughter. Despite Seth's lack of remorse, detectives were closing in on the truth. They used various strategies to get Tatiana to talk, including appealing to her maternal instincts and suggesting that Seth was solely responsible for Mary's condition. One detective asked Tatiana to put herself in the shoes of the officers who were called to the scene and discovered a severely malnourished child. He emphasized how thin Mary was and how unbelievable it was that she could have lost so much weight in just 2 days. Though Tatiana came across as a concerned and educated mother, she tried to minimize her role in the tragedy by claiming she didn't realize something was wrong until it was too late. Tatiana admitted that she and Seth had discussed Mary's condition about a month earlier when they noticed that their daughter wasn't filling out her clothes as she should have. Still, they chose to rely on faith, hoping that things would improve without medical intervention. When asked how she would react if someone claimed God told her to sacrifice one of her children, Tatiana firmly responded that she would never go through with it. The interview continued, with Tatiana speculating that Seth might have been worried about CPS involvement if they had taken Mary to the doctor. She suggested this could be why they avoided medical help. Ultimately, the detectives saw through their excuses. It was clear that the couple had prioritized avoiding CPS over the well-being of their child. Their neglect was enough for authorities to charge and arrest both Seth and Tatiana. The pair turned the interrogation into a mockery, laughing at the police and their tactics. They joked about Mary, showing no signs of remorse or concern for the life they had lost. Ultimately, Seth and Tatiana were arrested on charges of first-degree murder and first-degree child abuse. That night, the couple from Cedar Springs found themselves in jail, awaiting charges in connection with the death of their infant daughter. Investigators revealed that 10-month-old Mary Welch died due to malnutrition and dehydration. After their arrest, Seth and Tatiana were tried separately. During Seth's trial, the prosecutor delivered an impassioned account of the horrific conditions Mary had endured. She emphasized that Mary's suffering was nothing short of torture, as she had been confined to a filthy crib, deprived of basic care and nourishment. The defense attempted to downplay the severity of the case, arguing there were no visible physical injuries. The prosecutor, however, rebutted by stating that Mary's entire body was a wound, emphasizing the extensive damage caused by her starvation. It was further claimed that Seth knowingly allowed his daughter to die, viewing her as too small and weak to contribute to his plans for their farm. During the trial, Seth chose not to testify in his own defense. Instead, his attorney spoke on his behalf, arguing that Seth had provided food for his daughter and that his religious beliefs influenced his decision not to seek medical care for Mary. He suggested that Seth may not have fully understood the gravity of her condition. The defense portrayed Seth as misguided by faith, though unintentionally so. The prosecution, however, countered by highlighting the inconsistencies in Seth's supposed distrust of medical treatment. Despite his claims, Seth had sought medical care for himself. Prosecutors pointed out that, while in jail, Seth had requested and received prescription glasses, casting doubt on his fear of medical interventions. The prosecution argued that Seth's actions were selfish and contradictory, choosing care for himself but not for his own child. Seth's attorney also argued that the presence of soiled diapers indicated Mary was being fed, attempting to portray Seth and Tatiana as overwhelmed rather than malicious. He claimed that, while their parenting was flawed, it did not amount to child abuse or murder. However, the prosecution presented compelling evidence, including photos showing the extent of Mary's malnutrition and the unbearable conditions she had been forced to endure. The jury, made up of 7 women and 5 men, convicted Seth of first-degree child abuse and first-degree murder in January 2020. It took them less than 90 minutes to reach a verdict after 3 days of emotionally charged testimony. The evidence made it clear that Seth had failed to provide the necessary nutrition and medical care for his daughter, even as her body wasted away to just 8 pounds at the time of her death. One juror compared Mary's emaciated state to the images of starving children in Ethiopia, stating her condition was even worse. Tatiana's trial followed, where she recounted years of abuse at Seth's hands. She testified that Seth had subjected her to violence, including pointing a gun at her head and physical assaults. Her defense attorney argued that the abuse had left Tatiana emotionally and psychologically scarred. Despite her claims that she had fed and cared for Mary, the autopsy report revealed a different reality, showing that Mary had not been fed in the days leading up to her death. Tatiana insisted she had last breastfed Mary 19 hours before she died, but the prosecution argued that the evidence suggested Mary had been dead for at least 72 hours before they called 911. At the time of her arrest, Tatiana was pregnant and later gave birth to another child while in prison. The fate of her remaining children became a concern, with the public questioning whether she and Seth were fit to retain parental rights. On October 15, 2021, after about 3 hours of deliberation, a Kent County jury found Tatiana guilty of first-degree murder and first-degree child abuse in connection with Mary's death. Tatiana's defense attorney expressed disappointment with the verdict and vowed to appeal. Tatiana, who had once dreamed of opening a daycare to provide love and care for children, now faced a stark contrast between her aspirations and the tragic reality of her own daughter's death. Despite cultivating fresh produce on their farm, Seth and Tatiana failed to nourish their own children. Allegations surfaced that their other children were also neglected, even resorting to eating grass and dirt to survive. As Seth and Tatiana awaited their fate, their surviving children were placed in the care of relatives and foster homes. The case left many questioning how 2 parents could neglect their children so severely and what role Tatiana truly played in the tragic events. Was Tatiana another victim in this story, or did she share the blame? Did their other children face similar neglect? And could their fate have been different if their parents had cared for them properly? Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. On January 17, 2014, authorities arrived at the residence of 52-year-old Hal Sasko, where they discovered his lifeless body. As the investigation unfolded, It was revealed that an 18-year-old woman had been living with him, a detail that shocked many as she was widely believed to be his stepdaughter. However, she was notably absent from the crime scene. When the full extent of what had transpired in the house came to light, the entire community was left in a state of shock. Sarah Gonzalez McLean was born on July 9, 1994. She grew up in the capital city of Kansas, USA. During her early years, she was homeschooled and never attended a traditional school. Sarah was a quiet and reserved girl, but also very kind-hearted and thoughtful. She had a younger brother with a disability whom she took care of, and a close relationship with her older sister. When Sarah was still a child, a neighbor abused her, causing deep emotional trauma. This event had a lasting impact on her life. She began to experience recurring nightmares, reliving the abuse, and would wake up in the middle of the night, panicked and overwhelmed. The constant stress and anxiety prevented her from finding peace. Around this time, Sarah started sneaking out of the house and drinking alcohol to cope with her pain. Her concerned parents decided to seek help by sending her to a psychologist, hoping she could confront her trauma. However, things only worsened, especially at home. Around the same time, her parents went through a divorce, which deeply affected her. Sarah described her parents' divorce as the moment she felt completely unloved at home. Over time, she lost all contact with her father, and her relationship with her mother became increasingly strained. Feeling like she no longer belonged at home, Sarah sought to leave as soon as she could. At the age of 14, Sarah found a job at a local pizzeria. The owner, Harold Sasko, was a middle-aged man who, at first glance, seemed successful and trustworthy. At that time, he owned 3 pizzerias and was known to be a devout Christian. However, his employees had a different view of him. They often spoke about his inappropriate behavior. The manager of one of the locations mentioned that Harold Sasko instructed him to only hire young, attractive girls. He was uncomfortable with this and would often warn the new hires to be cautious around the owner. When Sarah joined the pizzeria and received this warning from the manager, she was still quite naive and thought he was exaggerating. As time passed, Harold began to interact more with Sarah, eventually gaining her trust. He would pick her up from school, drive her to work, buy her gifts, and even encouraged her to confide in him, asking her to think of him as a father figure. However, Harold also instructed Sarah not to tell her mother what was happening. She obeyed, and her family never found out about their relationship. Alongside her connection with Harold, whom she began to view as a father figure, Sarah experienced another traumatic event at the age of 16. This time, it involved a close friend. According to her, they were on vacation together when he pushed her onto a table, breaking it in the process. He then assaulted her and even burned her back with a cigarette. This incident deeply affected Sarah, who was already working through her childhood trauma in therapy. The memories of her past abuse came rushing back. Sarah returned to therapy, and this time she was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Things spiraled quickly. The stress and depression intensified to the point where she attempted to take her own life. As a result, Sarah was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for some time. There, she received therapy and was prescribed medication to aid her recovery. After being discharged, Sarah continued taking her medication and attended therapy sessions regularly. This support once again began to help her heal from her experiences. However, the situation at home remained highly stressful, and Sarah found it unbearable to stay there. By the time Sarah was hospitalized, she was no longer working at Harold's Pizzeria, but they had maintained contact. He would still pick her up from school, take her out for lunch, and ask her about her life. Being 50 years old, Harold saw an opportunity when Sarah was vulnerable and decided to exploit it. During this time, he repeatedly suggested that she move in with him. He was single, childless, and lived alone, with a successful business that was thriving. He told Sarah he could help her financially and even offered to pay for her college tuition. Despite being desperate to leave her turbulent home life due to the frequent, violent conflicts with her mother, Sarah repeatedly declined his offer. But in 2012, after graduating high school and turning 17, she finally accepted and moved in with Harold Sasko. At that point, it seemed like a fresh start. She believed that living with him would provide her with everything she needed. And in the beginning, that was the case. Harold bought her everything she required, enrolled her in college, provided her with a place to live, and didn't ask for anything in return. He showered her with gifts and was attentive to her needs and desires. Everything changed once Sarah turned 18. At that point, Harold began making inappropriate suggestions. He proposed that she enter into a romantic relationship with him in exchange for all the support he had given her. Naturally, Sarah refused. Throughout the months she had lived with him, they had pretended to have a stepfather-stepdaughter relationship to avoid any misunderstandings or suspicions. Sarah had never imagined that he would ask for such a thing. According to her mother, she had always disapproved of Sarah moving in with Harold, but Sarah had never listened. Many people close to them said that Sarah even called him Dad, which made his request all the more shocking. When Sarah refused, Harold became furious. He made it clear that if she didn't comply with his demands, she would no longer have a home or any support. Harold also knew about Sarah's history of substance abuse and that she had started drinking and using illegal substances at a young age. He exploited this by offering her drugs. Under the influence, Harold attempted to take advantage of her, and on several occasions he succeeded. Each time Sarah refused, he grew angrier, more aggressive, and violent. Harold eventually handed Sarah a list of all the things he had purchased for her and claimed that until she paid him back in full, she wouldn't be allowed to leave. He manipulated her, threatening to sue her for non-payment if she tried to escape. By this time, Sarah had secured a stable job, but earning minimum wage, she couldn't meet Harold's financial demands. Among the debts were 2 expensive cosmetic surgeries that Sarah had undergone at his urging. One was a rhinoplasty, and the other was a buttock implant. The second surgery caused her so much pain that she had to take medication for months afterward. Harold demanded $16,000 from Sarah. In addition to these debts, he also insisted that she pay him rent for the time she had lived with him. Sarah felt she had no way out. She couldn't return to her mother's home, as Harold had psychologically manipulated her into believing that no one wanted her back and that she wouldn't be accepted there. Her behavior changed drastically. Sarah was no longer the quiet, kind-hearted girl she once was. She became aggressive, avoided talking to anyone, and would lash out at the slightest remark. According to Sarah, her thoughts gradually shifted and she started to feel an urge to harm others. Her first step was visiting a pet store where she bought rabbits. Once home, She killed them with a knife, skinned them, and then ate them. Harold witnessed the entire event but said nothing. In fact, he laughed at her actions. If Sarah wasn't at work, she was at home with Harold, often under the influence of drugs or alcohol and in a foul mood because of everything she had gone through. At one point, she began taking antidepressants, hoping they would help. Weeks passed, but they had no effect. She then switched to stronger medication, but those didn't help either. Eventually, Sarah spiraled into a self-destructive path, and it was only a matter of time before something tragic occurred. On January 17, 2014, police officers arrived at Harold's house. His co-workers had reported him missing after he failed to show up at the pizzeria for several days, and they had been unable to reach him. The officers knocked on the door multiple times but got no response. They then looked through the windows to see if they could spot anything, and one of them saw the body of a man lying in a pool of blood. The officers broke down the door to enter the house. Inside, they found several empty beer cans next to the body. Harold's body was taken to the coroner's office for examination, and it was determined that he had died from multiple stab wounds to the neck. Additionally, an analysis of the beer cans revealed traces of sedative pills. The police knew that Sarah had been living in the house with Harold, and when they found her phone, they initially thought she might have been abducted. Her age made them think she could have been taken against her will. Investigators later learned that Sarah had called into her workplace, informing them that she would be absent for a few days due to the death of a relative. They spoke with her family, and her mother mentioned that Sarah had been trying to reach her grandmother. The police traced the calls to various payphones located at convenience stores. Reviewing the security footage from these stores confirmed that Sarah was the one making the calls, and she was traveling alone from Kansas to Texas. With this information, the authorities realized Sarah hadn't been kidnapped, and she became the prime suspect in Harold's murder. On January 25, 2014, 11 days after the murder, 19-year-old Sarah was found by park rangers sleeping in Harold's car in the Everglades National Park. Around 10:30 p.m., the rangers woke her up to arrest her and discovered she had a loaded gun. A search of the car revealed another firearm, drugs, a hatchet, and 2 knives. When arrested, Sarah wasn't immediately taken back to Kansas. Instead, she remained in Florida for questioning by several investigators. She offered no resistance and didn't try to fabricate any stories. Sarah quickly confessed to killing Harold and fleeing the scene. She explained that he had been harassing her for a long time, and she saw this as her only way to escape. Sarah detailed the events leading up to the crime. A few days before the murder, when Harold wasn't home, she went to a pharmacy and bought a packet of sleeping pills. On January 14th, 3 days before his body was found, Harold had the day off and was doing some repairs around the house. He asked Sarah to bring him a beer. That's when Sarah realized this was her opportunity. She knew that Harold wouldn't stop at just one beer, but would keep asking for more. After the third beer, Sarah started slipping sleeping pills into his drink. She explained that she waited until the third can to avoid him noticing any strange taste. As he continued to drink, she kept adding more pills, and, according to the police, she gave him a total of 5. The combination of alcohol and sedatives caused Harold to lose consciousness. Sarah then quickly tied his hands and feet. At one point, she said, he woke up for about a minute and mumbled something. Sarah didn't quite understand him, but said she felt a moment of pity for him. However, she was determined to go through with her plan. She pulled out a knife and stabbed him multiple times in the neck, nearly decapitating him. After realizing he was dead, Sarah used his blood to write the word "freedom" on the bathroom wall. She then washed her hands, took a shower, and changed her clothes. Before leaving, she took money, a tablet, and Harold's car keys. Sarah left her phone behind, believing the police would track it and think something had also happened to her. She drove toward Texas but didn't like it there because it was too cold at night, so she continued her journey to Florida. Most of the time, Sarah slept in the car, stopping occasionally to rest along the road. Upon arriving in Florida, Sarah visited a local tattoo artist named James Baker to get a new tattoo. It wasn't her first. She already had the phrase, "Only God can judge me," inked on her shoulder. For her second tattoo, Sarah chose a quote from a book, "The descent into the dark well at the bottom of our heart. In its cold, black depths, twisted and strange creatures dwell, best left undisturbed." Sarah had hoped that by cooperating with the police and sharing her story of abuse at the hands of Harold, they would show leniency and commute her sentence. However, this was not the case. The authorities painted Sarah as a true psychopath, while portraying Harold as a peaceful Catholic man who had only wanted to help her. At one point during her interrogation, Sarah admitted to one of the officers that during her fits of rage at Harold's house, she felt the urge to kill. The prosecution argued that Sarah had killed Harold simply because she wanted to know what it felt like to kill a man, not because he had been violent with her. A key piece of evidence found on Sarah's phone was a message from Harold apologizing for forcing her into a sexual relationship with him. However, this crucial information was not presented to the jury during her first trial, and all evidence of Harold's abuse towards Sarah was disregarded in the pursuit of justice. In February 2014, Sarah's trial began. Her attorney chose not to use the history of abuse as part of her defense, especially since the prosecution had chosen to ignore it. Instead, the defense team pursued a risky strategy, claiming Sarah suffered from dissociative identity disorder. They argued that Sarah had developed multiple alter egos to cope with the trauma she endured. However, this defense strategy failed to convince anyone. Neither the judge nor the jury believed the defense's claims. The prosecution presented a completely different narrative, focusing on the idea that Sarah had killed Harold purely to satisfy her curiosity about killing. They argued that the sexual relationship, while pressured by Harold, was consensual and unrelated to any form of violence. Moreover, the prosecution contended that the drugs found in the house had been purchased by Sarah, not provided by Harold, even though there was little concrete evidence to support this claim. The prosecution further asserted that Sarah had planned the murder in advance. Her phone contained several messages to her sister, suggesting that she had already devised a way to permanently get rid of Harold. Based on this, they argued that the crime was premeditated, requesting a first-degree murder conviction. Supporting this, investigators found Sarah had spent a month researching vulnerable areas of the human neck and methods of attack. On September 4, 2015, Sarah, who was 21 at the time, was found guilty of first-degree murder with premeditation. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 50 years. After the trial, the media uncovered much of the evidence regarding Harold's abuse and the testimony that had been withheld from the jury. It became clear that a significant portion of the truth about Sarah and Harold's relationship had been kept from the court. The reasons for this remain unclear, whether it was to preserve Harold's image as a quiet, religious man, or if the prosecution was simply determined to secure the harshest possible sentence for Sarah. This revelation drew widespread public attention to the case. In 2021, Sarah reached a plea agreement with the prosecutor, resulting in her sentence being reduced from 50 years to 25 years. Although she is still serving a life sentence, she will be eligible for parole after 25 years. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. In the city of Aurora, Colorado, Angela Craig was loved for her warm smile and dedication to her family. As a mother of 6, her life seemed perfect, especially with her husband James Craig by her side. But behind their happy appearance, there were dark secrets waiting to come out. Angela's sudden health problems set off a shocking investigation that revealed lies, betrayal, and a deadly plan created by the very person she trusted the most. Angela was born on April 15, 1975, in the bustling town of Dodge City, Kansas. She grew up as a beloved member of a large family with 10 children. Known for her wit, intelligence, and her ability to engage in captivating conversations, Angela was always the heart of any gathering. Her love for animals, despite her allergies, was evident throughout her life, and she also had a deep passion for reading and woodworking. As a student of interior design, Angela found beauty in creating and arranging living spaces. However, her most important priority was always her family. She maintained strong relationships with her siblings and was quick to offer a helping hand to friends and even strangers. Angela's passion for genealogy led her to become a family history consultant, where she helped people reconnect with distant relatives. She was also highly active in her church, serving as a choir director, teacher, and youth group leader. On December 18, 1999, Angela married James Craig, a man with dreams of becoming a doctor. In 2006, those dreams became a reality when James earned his doctorate in dental surgery from the University of Missouri, Kansas City. While at the university, James played a key role in establishing the International Dental Program, assisting foreign-born dentists in obtaining their licenses in the United States. By October 2006, James began practicing in Aurora, Colorado, and over the span of 23 years, Angela and James welcomed 6 children into their family. Despite the physical distance, Angela remained close with her siblings, especially her sister Toni, who lived in Utah. The two spoke on the phone daily and made time for many memorable trips together. With James's dental practice and Angela's deep involvement in the local community, the Craig family seemed happy and content. However, life took an unexpected turn on March 15, 2023, at 11 a.m. when Angela was rushed to the hospital suffering from a debilitating headache, dizziness, and nausea. James was by her side, providing support during the frightening ordeal. Despite the medical team's efforts, Angela's condition worsened by 2 p.m. when she suffered a severe seizure. Doctors acted quickly, placing her on life support as her concerned family sought answers. This was Angela's 3rd hospital visit in just 10 days, with recurring symptoms of headache, nausea, and dizziness, yet no clear cause had been identified. This time, however, her condition was far more serious, leaving the medical team puzzled. As Angela's condition deteriorated, Two close friends, Ryan Redfern and his wife, arrived at the hospital. Ryan, a fellow dentist and James's longtime friend from their university days, was also a financial partner in James's dental practice. In 2021, when James faced financial challenges, Ryan stepped in to help save the practice. His wife, who held a doctorate in nursing, was aware of Angela's recent health struggles and wanted to offer support. Angela's symptoms had first appeared on March 5, 2023, after returning from a visit to her sister in Utah. Feeling unwell, she sought medical attention on March 6, but the doctors found nothing alarming, prescribing her standard medication and recommending rest. However, Angela's condition worsened, leading to another hospital visit on March 9th, raising concern among her friends. On March 9th, while Angela was hospitalized, Ryan's wife reached out to James, offering her help. James, though appreciative, assured her that they had things under control at the moment. The next day, March 10th, Ryan's wife followed up, checking in to see if there had been any progress in Angela's diagnosis and offering her assistance again. James, grateful for her concern, acknowledged how challenging the situation had been, marking the beginning of a critical chapter in Angela's health journey. James expressed his growing concern as the doctors had conducted numerous tests, including several blood draws. Thankfully, the regular blood tests came back normal, ruling out autoimmune disorders and diabetes. The main issue at the time seemed to be Angela's blood pressure. Over the course of 24 hours, she had been given 5 liters of IV fluids, but her blood pressure remained alarmingly low. Despite the medical interventions, Angela still felt quite unwell. The doctors decided to keep her in the hospital for another night, hoping that she could return home the following day. Over the next few days, Ryan's wife continued to check in on Angela's health, offering unwavering support. James shared that additional tests had been run, including an MRI due to a family history of brain tumors, as well as ultrasounds and CT scans of her head, chest, and abdomen. Surprisingly, all these tests came back normal, and there didn't seem to be any medical explanation for her declining health. Without clear answers, Angela was eventually allowed to go home, but a troubling question remained. If all the medical reports showed Angela was perfectly healthy, why was her condition deteriorating by the day? Unfortunately, on March 15, 2023, Angela's health took a sharp turn for the worse. This time, her symptoms were even more severe. She was struggling with extreme dizziness, nausea, and severe stomach pain. Unable to reach James, who was at his clinic, Angela called her brother for help. He rushed her to the hospital, where she was admitted around 11 a.m. Upon receiving the alarming news, James hurried to be by his wife's side. In the midst of this crisis, James contacted his partner's wife to share the distressing update and even sent her 2 photos of Angela in the hospital room. Surrounded by medical professionals, Angela suffered a stroke and became unresponsive. Deeply concerned, Ryan and his wife decided to visit the hospital. They sent James a message to let him know they were on their way to offer support during this uncertain time. While en route to the hospital, Ryan received a troubling call from Caitlin, a relatively new office manager at the place where James worked. Caitlin had noticed some odd occurrences that raised questions about Angela's health. She shared an incident that took place on March 6, 2023. Caitlin had been working late at the dental office when James unexpectedly showed up, despite not having any patients scheduled. What struck Caitlin as odd was that instead of heading to his own office, James went down the hall to use a computer in one of the exam rooms. This was unusual because James typically used his own computer in his office, and this deviation from his normal routine seemed strange. About 30 minutes after Caitlin left the office, she received a text message from James. In the message, James mentioned that he was expecting a personal package to be delivered to the office and asked Caitlin to ensure it was received. He emphasized that no one else should open it. On March 13, 2023, the package James had mentioned finally arrived. However, when Caitlin went to pick it up, she discovered that a colleague had already opened it. Remembering James's request for confidentiality, Caitlin resealed the package and handed it directly to James. While repackaging it, something unusual caught her eye: a hazardous material label. The label was affixed to a cylindrical container marked with the words potassium cyanide. Caitlin assumed the chemical might have some medical or dental use she wasn't familiar with, so she resealed the box and quickly gave it to James. Later that day, she noticed James leaving the office, clutching the cylindrical container wrapped in brown paper. Her suspicions deepened. Why was James taking potassium cyanide home? Curious, Caitlin turned to Google to investigate the uses of potassium cyanide. That's when she stumbled upon a shocking discovery. The symptoms of potassium cyanide poisoning closely resembled those Angela had been experiencing. As Angela's condition worsened, with symptoms like nausea, vomiting, and low blood pressure, Ryan arrived at the hospital, still in shock from what Caitlin had told him. He met up with his wife, and together they went to see Angela, who was now on life support. Without wasting any time, Ryan approached one of the nurses on duty, sharing his suspicion that Angela might have been poisoned by James with potassium cyanide. Though taken aback by the unexpected information, the nurse took the claim seriously and agreed to conduct a new round of tests on Angela. Aware of the gravity of the situation, the nurse also dialed 911 to alert the authorities. Meanwhile, James stepped outside to take a phone call, giving Ryan and his wife an opportunity to leave the hospital. However, their departure was interrupted by a frantic call from James, demanding to know why they had left and informing them that the hospital staff suspected he had poisoned his wife. Ryan didn't hold back. He was upfront with James, confronting him about the mysterious package delivered to the dental office and the unsettling contents. He directly asked James why he had ordered potassium cyanide. Backed into a corner, James finally admitted that he had indeed purchased the chemical, but he claimed that Angela had asked him to do so, never imagining she would use it. After the tense phone call, James texted Ryan, pleading with him not to share their conversation with anyone, especially the police. He expressed concern that Ryan's involvement would only harm his family further. James acknowledged Ryan's motivations but insisted that if Ryan had come to him directly, man to man, rather than involving others, they might have avoided the current chaos. His frustration and anger toward Ryan were palpable. Ryan, however, couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Angela's deteriorating health. He made a crucial decision and contacted the police, sharing everything he knew and urging them to investigate further. Later that night, well past midnight, the police arrived at the hospital to discuss Angela's dire condition. She remained on life support, with no brain activity. The next day, on March 16, 2023, investigators visited Caitlin, the office manager. That's when the truth began to unravel. Caitlin revealed that on the morning of March 6, 2023, before Angela's first hospital visit, James had prepared a pre-workout protein shake for her. He proudly mentioned it at the office, portraying himself as a caring husband. However, things took a sinister turn when Angela suddenly became dizzy, and from that moment on, her health rapidly declined. Caitlin didn't hold back, also discussing the suspicious package and her concerns about the potassium cyanide. She explained how this lethal chemical could produce the same symptoms Angela had been experiencing, and in some cases could be fatal. Ryan, who had joined the conversation at the dental clinic, added more to the story, shattering the image of the seemingly happy Craig family. He disclosed that in 2021, when James was facing financial troubles and the threat of bankruptcy, he had confided in Ryan about his marital problems. Shockingly, at that time, James had been contemplating divorce. Even more heartbreaking was James's later admission that Angela had contemplated ending her life in 2022 through an overdose, but James had intervened to save her. According to Ryan, James claimed that Angela's self-harming tendencies became more pronounced when he asked for a divorce in December 2022. Despite these serious issues, James never reported any of Angela's behavior to the authorities or sought professional help for her mental health. This pattern of secrecy and neglect raised serious questions about recent events. To get a clearer picture of Angela's mental state, the police interviewed the couple's 6 children. Surprisingly, they painted a different picture, describing their mother as happy and full of energy, with no signs of the troubling behavior James had mentioned. This contradiction only deepened the mystery and suggested that James might have been fabricating a story to explain Angela's worsening health. As suspicion mounted against James, the police launched a full investigation. They obtained search warrants for both the Craig residence and James's dental office. They also began reviewing James's phone records and text conversations with Angela, dating back to March 6, 2023, the day she first reported feeling unwell. The text messages from that day revealed a disturbing exchange. Angela expressed her appreciation for a coffee James had made for her, showing affection and optimism for the day. However, soon after, she mentioned feeling dizzy and off, prompting James to suggest she check her blood pressure. The conversation took a troubling turn when James referenced heavy medications and acknowledged his past concerns, hinting at a possible trigger for Angela. He voiced concern about her symptoms, comparing them to those of a stroke, and asked about any weakness she might have been experiencing. This unsettling exchange, combined with the other evidence, left investigators with more questions than answers. Following the unsettling exchange between James and Angela, where he continued asking about her symptoms and offering suggestions, a troubling level of awareness and concern over her condition became apparent. The investigation took a significant turn when the police decided to inspect James's computer. They uncovered 2 email accounts linked to him, along with a disturbing search history related to Angela's declining health, raising more suspicions about his involvement. In February, just a month before Angela was hospitalized, James had searched terms like, "How many grams of pure arsenic does it take to kill a human?" and "Can arsenic be detected in an autopsy?" He had also looked up chemical suppliers in the city, all of which raised red flags during the investigation. One particularly damning piece of evidence was a purchase made by James on Amazon for a product labeled as 99.999% crystalline metalloid arsenic. The product description explicitly stated that ingesting this chemical could be fatal. Further probing into James's online activity revealed alarming YouTube videos he had watched. One video titled "Top 5 Undetectable Poisons That Don't Show Signs of Murder" provided instructions on how to create plant-based poisons. He also conducted 3 more searches related to homemade poison making, specifically from plants. As if that weren't disturbing enough, the investigators found another video detailing the effects of cyanide and arsenic poisoning, highlighting how difficult it is for doctors to detect these substances. The most incriminating piece of evidence came in the form of an order James placed for potassium cyanide. At this point, the puzzle pieces were coming together. It was becoming clear that James had been poisoning Angela all along. But why would someone poison his wife and the mother of his children? Was it related to his desire for a divorce? As investigators dug deeper, they interviewed friends and family members. Angela's sister provided critical insight. She revealed that only those closest to Angela knew the truth about her marriage with James, which was far from the loving facade they presented to the world. She disclosed that James had a history of extramarital affairs with multiple women. Even more shocking, James had confessed to Angela about his addiction to inappropriate online material since his teenage years. One particularly disturbing incident from 5 or 6 years earlier caught the attention of the police. The woman recalled Angela telling her that she feared James had deliberately drugged her. Angela suspected that James had drugged her in order to prevent her from intervening in his activities, shedding light on some of the strange text messages between the couple. However, police remained skeptical of James's explanation about drugging Angela, finding it unreasonable that he would resort to such extreme measures. She also shared that Angela had longed to escape her marriage, a sentiment she had expressed repeatedly over the past 16 years. Yet, every time Angela gathered the courage to leave, James would skillfully manipulate her into staying. Their marital issues extended beyond their personal relationship and into James's struggling dental practice. Further complicating the situation, James had tried his luck gambling in Las Vegas, losing over $2,000 despite being in $2 million of debt. To the police, it became clear that beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect marriage, the Craig household was rife with turmoil. The investigation uncovered even more damning evidence when they found emails detailing round-trip flights from 2 separate occasions. These tickets were reserved for Karen, an orthodontist based in Texas. The emails between Karen and James were far from professional. Their tone was intimate. Karen had filed for divorce in 2022 and had been in a relationship with James, something Angela knew nothing about. Digging deeper, investigators found that these flights were purchased on the same day arsenic was delivered to James's home. This suggested a calculated plan for James to be with Karen on March 16th. One of Karen's emails to James with the subject line, "See you soon," expressed her regret over the events happening in James's life that week. She apologized for not being a part of his world and for keeping her distance. As police gathered more evidence against James, hospital staff fought to save Angela. Tragically, on March 18th at 4:29 p.m., Angela was declared brain dead. She passed away without ever knowing the truth about what her husband had been plotting. Just hours after Angela was removed from life support, James was officially charged with first-degree premeditated murder. He didn't have much time to reflect on the charges because, on March 19th, he was arrested. A few days later, James found himself in a Colorado courtroom for his initial appearance. As the charges against him were read aloud, a mix of friends, family, and even some of James and Angela's children watched in shock. The disheveled 45-year-old man in an orange jumpsuit, handcuffed, was a far cry from the smiling blonde man seen in family photos. James Craig, already facing the grave charge of first-degree murder, was also hit with a second charge, tampering with physical evidence. The judge set James's bail at a staggering $10 million. His trial is set for December 2024. A week after Angela's death, new information emerged, revealing that she had not one, but 3 life insurance policies in her name. While it's not confirmed, this raised the chilling possibility that collecting those life insurance payouts might have been part of James's grim plan, along with his affair. Now, Angela's 6 children are left to grapple with the devastating reality of losing their mother while their father stands trial for her murder. Angela's children were her pride and joy, and following James's arrest, Angela's family stepped in to care for them. They made it clear that James's extended family should not be held responsible for his terrible actions. In Angela's obituary, her family and loved ones tried to capture the essence of her life beyond the tragedy of her untimely death. When Angela was declared brain dead, her family made the brave decision to donate her organs. While they couldn't save her, they found bittersweet comfort in knowing that her legacy lives on through the lives she helped save. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. It was 7:53 in the morning on April 22, 2016, when the Pike County Sheriff's Office in southern Ohio, United States, received a chilling call. On the other end of the line, a man's voice trembled as he gasped for breath. He could barely speak, but managed to say there was blood everywhere. Struggling to stay composed, he eventually explained what he had found. Her brother-in-law and one of his cousins were gravely injured. Officers immediately headed to the place of the crime. As they were en route, a neighbor flagged them down, asking them to stop. He insisted they check 2 other nearby homes, suspecting that other family members might also be in danger. His instincts were correct. Meanwhile, the man discovered 2 more bodies in another family home. As officers made their way through 3 trailer homes, the toll rose to 7 victims, all shot in the head while they slept. By midday, the horrifying news continued. Another family member had been found dead. The only survivors were a 3-year-old boy, a 6-month-old baby, and a newborn just 4 days old. Additionally, a little girl named Sophia survived, as she had been with her father that night, perhaps shielded from the tragic events. The Rhoden family, a large and close-knit clan from Ohio, lived in the rural area of Pike County. The patriarch, Chris Rhoden Sr., had once been married to Dana Rhoden, and together they had 3 children, Frankie, Hannah Mae, and Chris Jr. By 2016, Chris Sr. and Dana had separated but continued living on the same property on Union Hill Road. Chris, then 40 years old, worked as a laborer at the family's Big Bear Lake complex and shared a trailer with his cousin, 38-year-old Gary. Dana, 37, was a nurse's aide at a rehab center and lived in a nearby trailer with her younger children, who were 19 and 16 at the time. Also living with them was Hannah's 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. Frankie, at 20 years old, had moved in with his fiancée, Hannah Gilley, to another trailer close by. He had a 3-year-old son named Bentley from a previous relationship and a 6-month-old baby with his fiancée. Frankie spent most of his time helping his father with work at the family complex. The family circle also included Kenneth, Chris's brother, who worked in Columbus but lived only 15 minutes away from the rest of the family. On April 18, 2016, the family welcomed Hannah's newborn daughter, though her father was unknown, with rumors pointing to a relative. Still, there was no confirmation. Hannah, who had a strained relationship with Jake Wagner, Sophia's father, decided to raise her newborn within the family, juggling her work as a nurse's aide while finishing high school. The extended Rhoden family had a close bond, including Bobby Jo Manley, Dana's sister. Out of work, Bobby had been hired by Chris to care for his animals, unaware that one day, during one of his routine visits, he would stumble upon something unimaginable. At 7:53 a.m. on April 22, 2016, Bobby entered Chris and Gary's trailer, as he did every day. Immediately, he sensed something was wrong. Inside, he found the two men lying in a pool of blood. Horrified, he called 911, struggling to speak, and directed them to his address. Acting on instinct, Bobby rushed to another family home. He knocked, but there was no response until Bentley, the young boy, appeared. Panicked, Bobby entered the house and was met with another heart-wrenching sight. On the bed lay the bodies of Frankie and his fiancée, while their 6-month-old baby, miraculously alive but covered in blood, lay nearby. As the police made their way to the scene, a neighbor intercepted them, urging them to check 2 additional locations, suspecting more tragedy. He was right. In a third trailer, they discovered the bodies of Dana, Chris Jr., and Hannah, all lifeless. The only survivor was Hannah's days-old infant. News of the massacre spread like wildfire. A cousin of the Rhodens frantically tried to confirm that Kenneth was safe. Sadly, Kenneth had also been shot. He called the authorities to report finding the final victim. By 1:26 p.m., the death toll was confirmed. Chris Sr., Dana, Frankie, Hannah, Chris Jr., Hannah Mae, Kenneth, and Gary had all been killed. The only survivors were the small children, whom the killers had left unharmed, including little Sophia, who was, by chance, at her father Jake's house that night. When investigators examined the bodies, they pieced together a chilling timeline. Chris Sr. had a defensive wound on his right arm, indicating that he was awake when the assailants entered. He had fought back but was gunned down by 9 bullets. Gary was shot 5 times. Dana had 5 wounds to her head and neck, with some shots fired even after she was already dead, showing the killer's brutality. Chris Jr. had been shot 4 times in the head while sleeping, just like Frankie. Hannah and Hannah Gilley were also executed with 2 shots each to the head. Kenneth, on the other hand, was killed with a single shot. All the victims had been shot multiple times at close range. The wounds concentrated in the same part of the body, with a total of 32 bullets fired. The killers had clearly used silencers, as no neighbors heard any gunshots. Moreover, all the victims had their hands covered with plastic bags, and some bore further marks of brutality. One of the bodies showed evidence of 9 severe injuries. It became clear that this was a meticulously planned crime, meant to eliminate the entire family. At the crime scenes, investigators found 5 different types of shell casings, proving there was more than one shooter involved. Blood from the victims was everywhere, but no DNA from the killers was found. When detectives checked security cameras at the homes, they discovered they had been disconnected, with no traces of the attacker's DNA left behind. It was evident that whoever planned this crime did so with great care. Just as the case seemed to hit a dead end, investigators uncovered a new lead. In 3 of the 4 homes, they found marijuana grow operations, with one location containing over 200 plants. Quickly, they theorized that the Rhodens may have been involved in drug trafficking, something not uncommon in Ohio. Perhaps the motive for the murders was a drug-related dispute. However, despite investigating potential connections to cartels or drug dealers, they found no conclusive evidence. Authorities considered the possibility of a family dispute over money, possibly linked to drug sales, but this line of investigation led nowhere. They also found cockfighting cages in one of the 4 trailers, but illegal cockfights didn't seem to be the motive for the killings. Investigators were about to leave, frustrated with the lack of evidence when a key piece of testimony emerged. Dana's father told detectives that the killers had to be known to the family, as the dogs hadn't attacked them. This, combined with the fact that there were no signs of forced entry at any of the homes, narrowed the investigation's scope. The police declared that the murders were cold-blooded and that the killers were still at large and armed. They urged the remaining Rhoden family members to seek safety. 30 investigators fanned out across the state, combing every road and home, and questioning anyone connected to the family in hopes of uncovering clues. Panic spread throughout Pike County, and a local businessman named Jeff Robbie offered a $25,000 reward for information leading to the killers. Neighbors hung a sign on Christopher's barn door reading, "Do you know who killed us on April 22, 2016? By January 2017, the investigation yielded its first results, though indirectly. A Rhoden cousin was arrested for drug trafficking. However, the authorities had already determined that the amount of marijuana found at the crime scenes was not enough to suggest a cartel was involved. Months passed with little progress, despite over 550 interviews, 1,100 tips, and the analysis of 700 pieces of evidence. On April 13, 2017, authorities delivered a grim update, admitting that they still didn't have enough evidence to make any arrests. Nevertheless, the prosecutor assured the public that there were leads they couldn't yet disclose. A year after the massacre, a memorial service was held, attended by various officials. The Pike County killings remained a topic of conversation, but 2 years after the tragedy, only the local community seemed to care. The media, the sheriff's office, and the prosecutor were noticeably absent from the second memorial service. It seemed that the largest criminal investigation in the county's history was fading into obscurity, until June, when a major break in the case occurred. The prosecutor announced for the first time that the investigation was focused on the Wagner family, who were connected to Hannah through her ex-partner. The suspects were George Wagner father, his wife Angela Wagner, both 47, and their 2 sons, George, 27, and Edward Jake, 26. The Wagners had lived just 20 miles from the crime scenes. However, by then, the family had moved to Kenai, a small town in Alaska. With them was Sophia, Hannah's surviving daughter, now under Jake's custody after her mother's death. The Wagners claimed that they had moved away because of the immense grief caused by the Rhoden family's deaths. The prosecutor called for any information about the Wagners, but the family didn't remain hidden for long. Financial struggles forced them to return to Ohio. As preparations were made to arrest them, investigators began to piece together how the relationship between the 2 families had turned deadly. Jake Wagner met Hannah Rhoden when he was 18, and she was just 13 during their time in high school. They went to prom together and became inseparable, which also brought their families closer. When Hannah was 15, she became pregnant with Sophia. Shortly after Sophia's birth, Jake asked Hannah to move in with him and his family, believing it would be a healthier environment for their daughter. Hannah refused, feeling it was an attempt to control her. From that point on, things deteriorated. Both Jake and Hannah wanted full custody of Sophia, and their families were locked in a bitter struggle. At one point, Jake even proposed that Hannah sign a document granting shared custody. When she refused, Jake began to threaten her, sending texts claiming that, if necessary, he would take Sophia by force. He tried to manipulate her, saying that if she truly loved their daughter, she would know Sophia belonged with him. Jake also expressed fears in these messages that the Rhoden family could harm Sophia. These tense exchanges continued for 2 years, with Hannah repeatedly refusing to live with the Wagners. In March 2015, Hannah ended her relationship with Jake, calling him abusive in texts, where she revealed he had hurt her and she was tired of being pursued. Violence seemed ingrained in the Wagner family, as George the son had obtained full custody of his child by threatening the mother with weapons. The situation escalated further when Hannah announced she was expecting another baby. Though she denied Jake was the father, he wasn't entirely sure, as they had briefly reconciled. This reignited a new custody dispute. In December 2015, Angela Wagner hacked into Hannah's social media accounts and discovered a message that infuriated the Wagner family. In the message, Hannah had told George the son's ex-mother-in-law that the Wagners would have to kill her before she gave up custody of Sophia. A week before the murders, the Wagners made one last attempt to convince Hannah to grant Jake full custody of Sophia. Again, Hannah refused. At this point, Rita, Jake's maternal grandmother, forged a document to try to make this happen legally. Tensions peaked when George the father and Christopher Sr. had a heated argument over where Sophia should live, completely fracturing the relationship between the two families. It was then that the Wagners began planning the murders. By Christmas 2016, the Wagner family held a vote. They were deciding whether to kill the Rhoden family to gain custody of Sophia. The vote was unanimous. Everyone agreed. For 8 months, the Wagner family meticulously planned the massacre. They studied the Rhoden family's routine in detail, when they went to sleep, their daily schedules, and the layout of their homes. They even researched the family's security devices. At one point, they visited the Rhoden property and fired guns into the air to see how far the sound would travel, realizing it was too loud and could expose them. George Wagner father decided the best option was to buy parts to create homemade silencers. Meanwhile, Angela Wagner purchased new sneakers for her husband and sons to wear on the night of the murders and instructed them to destroy the shoes afterward. She also obtained phone jammers to secretly disable the victims' devices, preventing them from calling for help. To avoid recognition, George father acquired a truck to use during the killings. On the night of the massacre, Angela stayed home with Sophia, as it was her night to have custody. This provided them with a perfect alibi. George father then went to Christopher's house, pretending to involve him in a fake drug deal. Unaware of what was coming, Christopher let him in. Authorities later discovered evidence linking Angela to the crime. She had purchased sneakers just weeks before the murders, and the tread matched a bloody footprint found at one of the crime scenes. They also confirmed that Angela had hacked into her ex-daughter-in-law's accounts. When investigators inspected the Wagners' electronic devices, they found numerous searches related to parental custody, highlighting their obsession with controlling Sophia. There was also evidence of financial disputes between the two families, including a $3,000 argument over a car purchase. While Angela appeared to be the mastermind, authorities were certain that Jake led the executions and that the entire Wagner family was involved. On November 13, 2018, authorities arrested 6 people. The first 4 were George Wagner father, Angela, George's son, and Jake. They were charged by a Pike County grand jury with 22 crimes, including 8 counts of aggravated murder. They all pleaded not guilty. Jake was also charged with unlawful conduct for his relationship with Hannah, as he was 20 when she was 15. That same day, two others were arrested for perjury and obstruction of justice. Angela's mother, Rita, 65, and George's mother, Frederica Wagner, 76. Frederica was accused of lying about purchasing bulletproof vests for her son. Neither woman was imprisoned, but Frederica was fitted with a GPS monitor. Authorities publicly revealed the motive: the long-standing custody battle over Sophia. After years of uncertainty, all that remained was to await the trial. In June 2019, records showed that Frederica had purchased the vests after the murders, leading to the charges against her being dropped. Rita wasn't as fortunate. A handwriting analysis in 2019 proved she had falsified a custody document for Sophia, leading to her entering a plea deal with the prosecution to avoid prison. The rest of the Wagners remained in jail, refusing to cooperate. They expressed sadness over the deaths of the Rhoden family and claimed they wanted the real killers to be brought to justice. For a time, it seemed the case might never close, leaving the people of Ohio unsettled. Then, 2 years later, something unexpected happened. On April 22, 2021, the 5th anniversary of the massacre, Jake Wagner struck a deal with prosecutors. In exchange for sparing his family from the death penalty, Jake confessed to personally killing 5 of the 8 victims and pleaded guilty to 23 criminal charges. 8 were for aggravated murder, while the others included conspiracy, aggravated robbery, tampering with evidence, and unlawful conduct with a minor. Jake admitted that he felt he had to kill Hannah to gain custody of Sophia, and once he made that decision, he believed he had to eliminate the rest of the Rhoden family to avoid retaliation. He expressed deep remorse for his actions. Jake was sentenced to 8 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. After his trial, he agreed to cooperate with the prosecution in their cases against his parents and brother. Thanks to his testimony, investigators located the truck George the son had purchased specifically for the crime, as well as 3 firearms the Wagners had attempted to dismantle and burn. These weapons had been buried in concrete behind the family's pond. A specialist was able to reconstruct the fragments, confirming that the shell casings matched those found at the Rhoden homes. On September 10, 2021, Angela Wagner pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit aggravated murder, robbery, and tampering with evidence. In exchange for her testimony against the remaining accused, the prosecution dropped the aggravated murder charges. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Only George father and George son were left to face trial. On August 28, 2022, George Wagner's son's trial began. The prosecutor called George's ex-partner to testify, revealing she had distanced herself from the family out of fear for her life. The prosecution argued that George had been complicit in planning, executing, and covering up the murders. George, however, denied having any knowledge of the crimes before or after they occurred, stating that if his family had asked him to participate, he would never have agreed. After 3 months, George was found guilty on all 22 counts, including 8 counts of aggravated murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 111 years for firearms charges. George's father still awaits his trial. If convicted on the same 22 charges, he will face the same fate as his son. Despite the convictions, he continues to claim his innocence. The surviving children were placed in the care of distant relatives. For privacy reasons, their exact whereabouts are undisclosed, but it is known that they are safe and happy. The Wagner family's goal had been to gain custody of Sophia, claiming they could care for her better. Instead, they deprived her of her mother, her uncles, and her grandparents. The hope now is that she grows up far from her father's family, in an environment where violence is never seen as a solution. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. On a quiet April night in the small town of Michigan, an eerie stillness filled the air. A lone gas station, its lights casting unsettling shadows, became the backdrop for an unexplainable disappearance. Inside, everything seemed untouched. The cash still in the register, a coat hanging in the back room, and just a single drop of blood near the door. Yet, the employee who had been there only moments before had vanished without a trace. As the investigation unfolded, it became evident that this wasn't just a simple missing person case, but the beginning of a dark and twisted story that would haunt the community for years to come. Jessica Heringa, born on July 16, 1987, lived in Norton Shores, a town in Michigan. Raised in a modest family alongside her sister, Jessica became a mother at the age of 22, giving birth to a son with her longtime partner. By 2013, the couple was still together, living in a rented house, though their relationship was strained by financial hardships and frequent arguments. Jessica worked at a nearby Exxon gas station, situated close to Lake Michigan, where she was known for her warm and friendly demeanor as the station manager. Customers often praised her for her kindness, and despite the challenges she faced, Jessica was determined to provide a better life for her son, taking on extra shifts to make ends meet. She had dreams of studying accounting at university, but money was tight, and her boyfriend was unable to fully support their family. As a result, their plans for marriage were repeatedly postponed. On the night of April 26, 2013, Jessica was on her usual shift at the gas station. Her day had started with a quick shopping trip around 3 p.m., followed by her arrival at work around 4:35 p.m. She parked her car and began her evening shift, which was set to end at 11:30 p.m. That night, she was the only employee on duty. At 11:14 p.m., a customer dialed 911 to report something unusual. He had entered the gas station to pay for gas and cash, but found no one at the counter. He told the dispatcher, "I'm not sure what's going on, but there's no one here. The door is open, the lights are still on, but there's no one to take my payment. Only my car and another vehicle are outside. Why is no one here? It feels strange." Within 10 minutes, the police arrived at the scene. They searched both inside and outside the gas station but found no signs of a struggle. Everything appeared normal. Jessica's coat was in the back room, along with her purse containing $400, her car and house keys, and a single drop of blood was found near the door. Another drop was later discovered near the back storage area, identified as Jessica's. The cash register was untouched, with all the money still inside. The last recorded transaction had been for a lighter at 10:52 p.m. The gas station lacked interior security cameras. Near the register was Jessica's pack of cigarettes, suggesting she had only stepped away briefly, intending to return. Her car, parked outside and locked, remained where she had left it, but Jessica herself had mysteriously disappeared. Upon discovering the abandoned station, the police contacted the gas station's owner, who in turn called another manager living nearby to secure the premises. The authorities also notified Jessica's family of her disappearance. Her parents began calling friends in hopes of finding clues about her whereabouts. One friend remembered stopping by the station between 8 and 9 p.m., noticing nothing out of the ordinary. Later that evening, another employee arrived to close the station. She recalled that around 11 p.m., she and her husband had ridden past the station on a motorcycle. They noticed a silver Chrysler minivan parked near the service entrance, its back door open. Concerned that Jessica might be involved in a robbery, they paused to observe. The employee spotted a young man with messy, curly hair near the minivan, wearing an orange sweater. She watched as the man repeatedly opened and closed the van's back door before eventually driving away. When the police reviewed surveillance footage from nearby buildings, they found a video showing a silver Chrysler passing by the Exxon station at 11:02 p.m. A nearby store clerk also provided information to the police, mentioning that he had seen a man in the minivan speaking with Jessica. At first, he thought the man was merely flirting with her, given her attractive appearance. He observed Jessica standing outside while the man questioned why she wasn't inside. Both the store clerk and Jessica's co-worker, who had witnessed the man by the minivan, helped create a composite sketch of the unidentified individual. He was described as a young man, light-skinned with dark curly hair, stocky build, and standing about 6 feet tall. The sketch was released 3 days after Jessica's disappearance, but despite numerous calls to the police, no substantial leads emerged. The sheer number of silver Chrysler minivans in the U.S. posed a significant challenge for the investigation. In Michigan alone, there were about 15,000 registered vehicles of this kind, making it difficult to identify the specific driver connected to Jessica's disappearance. Initially, Jessica's boyfriend was a suspect. He admitted that they often argued but denied ever physically harming her. He fully cooperated with the investigation, telling police that he had been home with their 3-year-old son on the night Jessica disappeared. Without a car, he had no way of traveling to her workplace. After investigators checked phone records, they confirmed that he had been at home that night, ruling him out as a suspect. The investigation revealed that Jessica had many admirers, thanks to her friendly and outgoing personality, which sometimes led to misunderstandings. One such admirer was a married 37-year-old plumber. He visited Jessica at the gas station around 9:30 p.m. on the night she disappeared, confessing his love for her and even saying he was willing to divorce his wife for her. However, Jessica rejected his advances. He left the station, called his wife, and talked with her for about 50 minutes before heading home. After a polygraph test and interviews with his wife, he was also cleared as a suspect. Next, attention turned to the brother of the Exxon station manager. He mentioned that he had visited the gas station around 9 p.m. on the day of Jessica's disappearance. During his visit, he noticed that she seemed upset. When he asked her what was wrong, Jessica confided that she was experiencing family troubles. He offered her a place to stay, but she declined. After making a purchase and spending a short time at the station, he left for a night fishing trip at Lake Michigan. Detectives reviewed his phone records for that night, which confirmed that he had left the gas station and gone fishing, leading to his removal from the suspect list. Search and rescue operations for Jessica were launched, involving helicopters, trained dogs, and extensive searches of residential and commercial properties, woods, and Lake Michigan. Despite these thorough efforts, no clues were found, and the case hit a dead end. Nearly a year later, in February 2014, a similar incident occurred in Michigan. A petite, blonde woman with glasses was attacked by a man as she returned home late at night. She was kidnapped, taken to her apartment, and assaulted. Though her life was threatened, the attacker eventually released her after several hours. The perpetrator, identified as a 42-year-old man, was quickly tracked down but resisted arrest by brandishing a fake gun at the police, leading to his fatal shooting. He had a criminal history, including a kidnapping conviction in 2004 and an arrest in 2011 for indecent exposure. Notably, in 2014, he lived in a dormitory across from the Exxon gas station where Jessica worked. However, investigators found no evidence linking him to Jessica's disappearance. 2 years later, in 2016, another incident involving a young woman unfolded. After leaving a friend's party, she became disoriented on a dark street. A man in a silver minivan approached, asking if she was okay and offering her a ride, which she declined. However, when she asked to use his phone, he agreed, but only if she got into the van. Once inside, the man locked the doors, revealed that his phone was dead, and brandished a weapon, ordering her to stay quiet. He began driving, but the woman, feeling nauseous, asked him to roll down the window. Seizing the opportunity, she jumped out of the moving vehicle through the open window and fled to a nearby house. The man sped away. The woman immediately contacted the police and provided a description of her kidnapper. Using surveillance footage, the police traced the license plate of the silver Chrysler minivan and identified the driver as 46-year-old Jeffrey Willis. Willis, a factory worker, lived a quiet and modest life with no prior legal issues. When police located him, they searched his minivan and found a semi-automatic pistol. The weapon was traced to one of Willis's co-workers, who had reported the firearm missing along with its laser sight. Willis had stolen the gun some time earlier and was promptly arrested. A search of his home revealed a box filled with various BDSM items, including handcuffs, chains, ropes, gags, a vibrator, a video camera, and a bullet that matched the pistol. The box also contained insulin syringes filled with an unidentified liquid, sedatives, Viagra, lubricant, disposable gloves, and a diagram of the female anatomy with injection sites marked. On Willis's computer, authorities found disturbing videos showing staged kidnappings with young women as victims. A hidden hard drive in a ventilation duct contained footage he had secretly recorded of his neighbors swimming, unaware they were being filmed. A folder on the computer labeled Victims contained 2 subfolders, one named after Jessica Heringa and another for a woman named Rebecca Blech, who had been murdered. Rebecca, a 36-year-old woman, had been tragically killed on June 29, 2014, roughly a year after Jessica's disappearance, in an area just 20 minutes from the Exxon station where Jessica had worked. Rebecca had gone for an evening run but never returned home. She was found by neighbors lying on the road, her clothing disheveled, initially leading authorities to believe she had been struck by a car. Though unconscious, Rebecca still had a pulse when she was discovered. Emergency services were called, but she succumbed to her injuries before they could save her. The autopsy report revealed that Rebecca died from 3 gunshot wounds to her back and head, along with multiple bruises on her wrists and legs. At the time of her death, her killer remained at large. However, 2 years after Jeffrey Willis's arrest, new evidence linked Rebecca's murder to the gun found in Willis's minivan. Willis denied any involvement, but prosecutors theorized that he had attempted to abduct Rebecca, and when she resisted, he shot and killed her. Forensic analysis later discovered Rebecca's DNA on a glove recovered from Willis's residence. Willis was convicted of Rebecca's murder and sentenced to life in prison. While serving his sentence, Willis faced additional charges related to the kidnapping of Jessica Heringa. Despite his consistent denial, a review of Willis's phone records showed that on the night of Jessica's disappearance, he had been present at the Exxon gas station where she was last seen. Following that, Willis traveled to his late grandfather's house, located about 13 minutes from the station. When police arrived at the residence, they found the front door heavily secured. Forcing their way in, they discovered various cleaning supplies, powders, and bleach in the basement, all bearing manufacturing dates from early 2013, around the time of Jessica's disappearance. Willis's co-workers reported his unusual absence on April 27, 2013, the day after Jessica vanished. Uncharacteristically, he had failed to show up for his factory job. When Willis returned to work a few days later, he had deep, noticeable scratches on his face and hands, raising suspicions among those who knew him. A woman who had visited the gas station on April 25th, the day before Jessica disappeared, contacted the police. She mentioned arriving at the station late at night and expressing her concern for Jessica's safety, being there alone so late. Jessica acknowledged her worry with a nod, appearing anxious and somewhat frightened. At that moment, an unknown man inside the station remarked to the visitor, "Don't worry, she's got customers looking out for her." Shortly after, the man left. The concerned visitor, still uneasy about Jessica's safety, remained in her car outside until Jessica finished her shift and left. Tragically, Jessica disappeared the following day. In 2016, the witness positively identified Jeffrey Willis, recalling that she had seen him at the gas station. Investigators found that Willis had frequented the Exxon station, interacting with Jessica on at least 15 occasions. Simultaneously, Willis's cousin, Kevin Bloom, a 48-year-old prison guard, was detained after making inconsistent statements during questioning. His contradictions eventually led to a confession. Kevin revealed details about Rebecca's murder that had not been made public and admitted to helping Willis conceal Jessica's body. Kevin described how, on April 27th, the day after Jessica's abduction, Willis had invited him to a party at his late grandfather's house. Upon arriving, Kevin Bloom saw Jessica for the first time, lying unconscious on the floor, bound and gagged. The cousins wrapped her body in a sheet, transported it in a car to a wooded area where Willis had already dug a grave, and buried her. They then returned home. When Kevin led police to the forest to identify the burial site of Jessica, he spent considerable time wandering the area. Despite his efforts, he couldn't pinpoint the exact location of her grave. Even though Jessica's body was never found, alive or dead, Willis's trial proceeded. The prosecution presented substantial evidence to charge Willis with her kidnapping and murder, relying on the theory that Willis had been stalking Jessica for some time. On the night of April 26, 2013, he allegedly parked his vehicle near the service entrance of the gas station, entered the premises, and struck Jessica on the head with his gun. During the assault, the gun's laser sight cover fell off, and Jess's blood was left on the floor. Willis then dragged Jessica out through the service exit, placed her in the back seat of his car, and transported her to his late grandfather's house, where the most horrific acts took place. A forensic analysis of Willis's computers revealed that he had saved photos and news articles about the search for Jessica, tracking the progress of the investigation. Investigators also discovered that Willis had used a computer password consisting of Jessica's initials and the date April 27, 2013, believed to be the actual day of her death. Willis maintained his innocence, insisting he was at home on the night of Jessica's abduction. His defense team argued that the prosecution lacked direct evidence linking him to the crime, noting that no DNA belonging to Jessica was found in Willis's home or vehicle. As part of their strategy, Willis's defense pointed out that Jessica had developed a severe substance abuse problem before her disappearance, suggesting that her abduction could have been related to illegal drug activity. Despite these claims, Jeffrey Willis was convicted of the murder of Jessica Heringa and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Throughout the trial, he showed no remorse or empathy. Kevin Bloom was found guilty of assisting in the disposal of Jessica's body. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison and 5 years of probation, and his employment within the prison system was terminated. A few years after his conviction, Willis became a suspect in another cold case. On October 17, 1996, in Fruitport, Michigan, Angela Marie Thornburg, a young woman, was found murdered, and her killer was never caught. Willis, who graduated from the same high school as Angela in 1988, was linked to her 1996 murder. At the time, Willis, then 28, was working as a janitor at his former school. Concerns arose when the school's principal noticed how much time Willis spent in the computer lab. Although the results of this investigation were never disclosed, Willis was immediately asked to resign from his position. As the investigation into Angela's murder continues, many details remain shrouded in secrecy. More than a decade after Jessica's disappearance, her remains have yet to be discovered. Following this tragedy, a custody battle ensued over Jessica's son between her sister and Jessica's partner. Ultimately, the child is being raised by Jessica's biological family. Additionally, Jessica's parents played a key role in advocating for legislative changes, which resulted in the passage of a law requiring night-shift gas stations to install surveillance cameras to prevent similar incidents from happening in the future. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.